Um, okay.
Yeah, we're
So we are at paragraph um paragraph 102 is we didn't read paragraph 102. We finished 101, right? 101 talked about the perfect death. And now he's going to go through a number of details of the text. So let me get back the text, but now I've marked out exactly what are the details he's going to be focusing on. What are the issues? So let me get my pointer here. Okay, so he doesn't do this exactly in this uh, order. Am I seeing this right? Do you see 2 points?
I see one.
Oh, okay. It's on top of true or something.
Yeah, true.
Okay. So yeah, so the first thing is the word that he uses for here for true. It's not the usual word like alethios, cognate with aletheia. It's gnesios, like genuine. So what does this what are genuine philosophers? And then he talks about the doxa, the belief of the genuine philosophers, and of course, philosophers in some like in a strict Platonic account, they shouldn't have doxai, right? They should have opinions. So what is this that, genuine philosophers have an opinion? What does that mean? We'll talk about what does it mean to say that they talk to each other, right? Why does he specify this? Um, he says that the body is evil, and of course, especially if with this Platonism that values ritual and things that you do with the body, it's puzzling that he calls it an evil. Um, and he uses a weird word for what happened to it, that the soul is fused with the body. The translators of the Damascus text translated as contaminated with, right? What is this, joining with the body? And why is it specifically the truth that's said to be the aim of what the philosophers really desire? Right. It's supposed to wisdom and good. There are many options when you want to say what the philosophers really desire. There's a question here. So he goes through a number of problems that that the body brings, and he gives us a little itemization of all the different um, issues. So he tries to organize all these things. He says, "Oh, we need nurture, and it's got diseases, and so there are all these. There's an issue about organizing all these different problems that the body brings." He mentions that disease is a problem of the body, and that seems to imply that health is something that the philosopher needs, and that's part of the happy life. So this mention of disease brings in the question about to what degree external goods are necessary, right, for happiness, right? Because he's mentioned the disease here. And then there's the claim that all wars are due to the desire to acquire wealth, and that's like really weird. Like it's a very strong and general claim. It doesn't seem to agree with other things that Plato says in other places. Um, then going on, he talks about how we have to escape from the body. And oh, your camera went black. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. I'll see.
So he's talking about how to escape from the body, and so this brings up the question about, how to separate the separate existence of the soul, and also brings in the question of like, do we really have thinking without the body at all, especially without imagination? So he goes into there are a few paragraphs about that. That is only then when we are dead. So can we not, be perfect philosophers in life? This connects with this expression here also as much as possible. And then there's like many paragraphs to deal with this idea of purity and that for it is not permitted to the impure to attain the pure. So those are the issues. We'll see if we get to talk about all of this today, but those are like the issues he's raised in the text. Um,
Here, the battery died. I'll put the other camera. I tried to put one that needs a battery, and now it's dead.
oh, okay. So
Do this.
yeah, you.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay.
Okay, so
Um,
do you want to? to
So
start
let's
reading?
read here. Yeah.
Yeah, from 102.
Okay. Let me just put it up. So 10, wait, I'm here 10, so 101 we did the trail. So 102. How can the body be an evil? You hear me, right?
Yeah.
When it is an integrating part of the world, I don't know what integrating means, and a work of God, and has been given to souls as a help towards recollection. It is an evil relatively. The answer is it is an evil relatively for souls on the way to purification.
Right. An integrating part of the world just means it's one of the things that makes up the world. And implicitly the world
Okay.
is beautiful, so anything that makes it up is. Um, and also I think the idea might be not just that it makes up the world, but like the not just like your body is part of the world, but body is something that belongs to the world.
Hmm.
The world is a god. Right. The work of a god, yeah, the creation of a god, and has been given to souls to help towards recollection, right? Because you see things and you remember the forms. So yeah, so it's what's interesting here is this relative notion of evil, right? So that this means that like different levels on the scale of virtues, there will be things that are different that are evil for just on one level and not on another. And because after all, you're seeking different things. And also, I think what's interesting in this is when he says it is an evil relatively. Then the Greek is prostikakon. So it's like it's an evil in the category of relation, right? Because it's only relatively evil. So
Hmm.
it's an evil that's an interesting use of the idea of prosti.
Okay, so
Um,
and that's he's fine with that. Like you, I mean, Plato says that, so he's stuck.
yeah.
Like we can say that the body is evil in this way.
I guess
Okay.
this also makes it clear, like, oh, that's like one of the indications that this dialogue is about purificatory virtue, right? Because the
Hmm.
here in this dialogue, body is evil.
Right. Okay. Or so, but so evil would mean something like doesn't let people get the or is some kind of hindrance to purification. That's what.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hindrance to living a separate life.
Hmm. Okay. 103. What is the nature of the belief of the philosophers mentioned here? It does not originate from sense perception. That's not the kind of belief. Why? This, says the commentator, is obvious. Who's the commentator? Is obvious from the whole context.
The commentator's Proclus.
Okay. Also, here is nor does it relate to things sensible. So it's not opinions about things sensible, but on the contrary, to life without the body, right? This is their opinions of what the true life is. It is therefore rather like a doctrine arrived at by discursive thought and rational knowledge. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's like it's. I don't really know why the translators put doctrine here in italics. I think the idea is so it's a conclusion that you reach through discursive thought and rational knowledge. Um, the right, the belief here is like the content of this whole speech, right? That you have to separate yourself from the body. And so it's yeah, the idea is that this is a conclusion based on a priori premises, let's say.
And that would be called doxa because, like, what's.
Ah, right. So I guess so that's why he uses doc, yeah. dogma here. So I guess it's called doxa because doxa is can be just an affirmation, a claim, right? So it's a claim in that sense. It's a belief. It's a doxa, right?
Right. It's something like this is what like he said, this is what they say to each other. He's not really
Yeah,
talking about like how they know it and getting into all these like levels of knowledge and things.
yeah.
That's
He's
really
not.
the answer.
Yeah, and he's not using in this negative sense of something that originates from sense perception, or something.
Hmm.
Just using it in the sense of claim.
Right. Um, okay. 104. Like simply we would just say that like not every time the word doxa says in Plato does it imply the whole distinction between doxa and episteme and all of that.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, we could read this 103 as just being a linguistic point. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. The 104. Genuine is any form when it is unmixed with its own privation. That's what you said authentic means. And is also
Right.
true because unmixed with falsehood. This is how we should practice philosophy, not diluting it with any element of the unphilosophical way of life, at least not voluntarily, because sometimes it's necessary, but avoiding it as far as possible.
Right. So that's the point about, so he's explaining in what sense he calls them the true philosophers, right? I mean, that would, the translation here is genuine. And so the point here is that they are unmixed with things that are unphilosophical. And it's not about them, for instance. I mean, it's not about like them being true philosophers in the sense that they correspond perfectly to the paradigm of philosophy. Of course, you can say that the two things go together. Being unmixed with the opposition is leads you to being correspond perfectly. But the connotation here is of being unmixed. So I guess this is relevant because it again points to the theme of purity and purification in the dialogue.
Hmm. Okay. 105. What is this contamination of the body with the body? A partnership that brings about an abnormal condition both for the body and for the soul. Like for both, because they're supposed to be unmixed. Whereas in the case of perfect souls, the partnership preserves each of the two in its natural state.
Yeah, that's an interesting claim. The so the idea is like this separation is going to be good for both. It's going to be good for the body as well. So the body works best also um, when the soul is, pure and separated from it. I mean, we can understand how moderation and the political virtues are best for the body. It would seem like that the ascetic practices of the pure of purification might not be uh, true for it. But I guess if you think back to the Plato's Republic, um, that city is the feverish city, right? And that is the city of political virtue. So there might be an idea that even in political virtue, you are entertaining a number of bodily desires, like for honor and for luxury goods and things like that, which which are actually external to the body and are actually bad for it. It's only the ascetic person who only does what's necessary for the body to be healthy, really, right? Which
Mhm.
the people in the Republic call them pig, right? Because he lives in the city of pigs. So that might be this idea. It could also be that there's a um that the perfect souls that like there's a metaphysical point here, right? Because um there's the case of the incarnation or the embodiment of the souls of like the planets, right? And of the whole world. And in this case, they are necessarily embodied, and yet they're supposed to be divine souls that are, that they're living an entirely detached life, right? So they probably are like the model here, where, those are the best souls in the sense of most attached to their bodies, but also they have the most perfect bodies as well, right? Whereas our souls end up somehow mixed with the body, and we also have mortal bodies, right? So there's also this metaphysical side to the doctrine here from 105.
Mhm. Okay. But how, in what way are they so, like, what does it mean for them to be unmixed and
What does it mean for the souls to be unmixed with the body of those? Well, the theory is that they are entirely dedicated to the contemplation of the forms, and their celestial bodies, they just represent immediately what those thoughts are. So they don't dedicate any attention, let's say, to the motion of their bodies, right? Their motion of their bodies is a simple, as it were, dance that immediately reflects what they're thinking.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Um, okay, let's continue. Um, what is the contaminant? And we did this. So 106, to each other, in a context dealing with purification should be understood as soul to soul. Okay, not sure.
Right. So this is what the true philosophers say to each other,
Right.
right? Believe when and so he's saying that they say this as souls to each other, right? And not as embodied souls.
Hmm. Yeah, that's not sure what that gives me. Okay.
Um, right. Yeah.
Okay, 107. In in what way is truth the goal? Insofar as it brings the philosopher home to his final destination, as beauty does the lover and proportion the musician.
Right. So truth is not the final destination, but it is what points the way to the final destination.
What
Right.
is truth then?
Um, so it's like the beauty for the lover, right? So the lover like what the lover wants to be with is the loved one, right? And the loved one is recognized because they are beautiful. So the philosopher wants to say be with the gods or be with or live with contemplate the intelligible realities. And why? Because they are the most intelligible things, because they are the most true things. So truth is what marks the goal, but it is not itself the goal, right? The goal is the true thing, not truth.
Okay, okay, that's right. But we could say we would think something like that he wants them because they are true or some like because they're reality, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Or just that truth. I mean, in the same way, like the lover and the musician. Like the musician is after making good music, I guess, or something like that. but the um, proportion is like the how do they call it? Not sure. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, you could, like, he doesn't mention this, but like, so you could say that he wants the true thing, but he also wants knowledge, right? Because he wants to be with, like, to achieve the true thing, right? And so that would be a different way of specifying his goal, right? So there's the final destination, there's being at the final destination, but there's also the what marks out the final destination, and that's the true. Hmm.
Right, but then we would say again that what the destination is the knowledge, the intelligible things, right? Not the
Right.
knowledge.
Yeah. Knowledge is being with the intelligible things. Yeah.
Hmm.
Having the intelligible things. Okay. Um, Now in 108 he organizes the many different obstacles that the body puts.
Okay. First, Socrates enumerates the obstacles to philosophy that are indispensable to natural life. Okay. Secondly, those that are adventitious and against nature.
Right. This is diseases probably, right?
Hmm. Thirdly, the effects of appetitive life. Uh,
Desires and things he mentions.
fourthly, the
Wants, desires,
phantoms.
fears.
Yeah, okay. Fourthly, the phantoms and triflings of sensory and imaginative life.
Right. In our text, all sorts of illusions and much nonsense.
Mm. Fifthly, all external things that distract the mind, like war and commerce. For in each
Right.
case, the garment the soul has put on first, the garment the soul has put on first must be cast off last.
Right. So this is interesting. So he's referring to the theory, the pneumatic body, which is, as it were, a number of garments that the soul puts on, and as it descends into becoming. And here, so it says the ones that it puts on first, it must take off last. So the ones it takes off first are the ones that it uh, um, put on last. So the first thing, let me share here the image again. So the idea is there's like when we are born, so that's like the last part of embodiment, then we start having a body that we need to nurture, right? And but before that, even, and so that's like the existence. But this is interesting. So before that, there is, the capacity of the soul to give life, and health, right, to it. Before that, still, and so these two are like closely connected with the vegetative soul, right, of growth and existence. But prior to this vegetative soul, there's the perceptive animal soul that has to do with wants, desires, fears, or all sorts of illusions and much nonsense. So these are the affects of appetitive life and the phantoms and triflings of sensory and imaginative life. So these for Proclus, their seat is most properly the pneumatic body, and so that's the um what's and that's so something prior to being embodied in a specific physical body. And the fifth thing is the all external things that distract the mind, war and commerce. So you can say, well, why is this like the first to be put on? And like when the soul is being embodied, well, it's this kind of desire for glory, desire for lots of riches, that that are not dependent, they don't satisfy our body. So they are um they're desires that exist beyond our death, right? They're like the kind of desire that guides us when we're choosing a life. So they're also the kind of desire that guides us when we're coming down, right? And choosing which life to lead. Like because the myth of Ur talks about souls that are coming down for the first time to choose the life. And and so and so those would be the very first things to be put on because these are the things that make us that say um uh make us want to be in a body in the first place, to be in the world of change, whereas the others have more to do with being in this specific body.
Mhm.
Um and so those are the So that's the way he's interpreted this passage. It's talking about the many like the many steps of the soul's embodiment backwards, right? Because you're in some sense in seeking out purification, you are somehow undoing your commitment to leading this particular life in this body.
One second, I have to pick up this call. One second. Yeah, I'm back.
Sorry.
Okay.
Um, okay, so yeah, so that 108 was just as it were, it's finding in the Phaedo text a division of steps of embodiment.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right. Okay. Okay. Let's continue. Um,
109.
109. 109. Does it now follow that health is an integrating part of happiness if sickness is an obstacle to it? So the answer is not really. The wise man will use both in a way conductive to happiness. That's Proclus' answer. And then Damascus says it is better to say that health, though not an essential part of our happiness, at least does not stand in its way, and insofar as it is preferable.
Right. So this is, goes back to the Stoic doctrine of indifference.
Hmm.
So anything that's not virtue is not in itself good or bad because it can be used both ways. And Proclus is, and so is since Plato here says that, sickness is a problem, does that mean that health is part of happiness? Both Damascus and Proclus are giving Stoic style answers where Proclus says, well, the wise man will use both in a way. So um, he can also use sickness, right? Let's say as an opportunity for meditation and reflection and something like this, and maybe to, get out of political responsibilities. Um, and whereas Damascus says that no, you should still say that okay, health is not part of happiness, but it is preferable because it's not impeded. Right.
Right. Um, this turns into like this somewhat quabbling over words. Like we need to say that health doesn't constitute happiness, but it's still kind of useful. Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah, because well, yeah. So you say a philosopher who gets very sick. And then are you going to say, like, this philosopher shouldn't say, now I have to take care of my body all the time, therefore I am, my character has changed and something like that. No, you're still the philosopher you were. It's just that this gets in the way. So I guess that's the point about saying that, doesn't stand in the way of happiness, right?
Mhm. Okay. Um, Continue. 10110. How can you maintain that all wars are for the sake of wealth? Many have evidently other causes. Okay. So we can answer with hard procuration, either that it holds good as a general rule, or that the hope of loot stimulates war. That's would be one answer. Two different answers. I don't know. Or with Longinus, that Plato calls all external things wealth. That would be another answer. Or with the Attic commentators, that all belligerents use money as an instrument. These would all be different kind of
Y-
excuses.
Yeah, and this is probably like that Proclus just gave all these answers, all these different possible answers.
Hmm.
And for this claim that all wars are for the sake of wealth, right? Um, and so like the that that it holds good as a general rule is, oh, so he's just doing a generalization here. That's like not a very satisfying one. Also, not that the hope of loot does, because it doesn't answer the question of like not every war is stimulated by that. Longinus's answer is a bit better, right? Because then he'd say, well, even if you're doing war for the sake of like reputation, or for like or in order to show that you're strong so that other people don't attack you, and these things, well, in a sense they're all external things, so, and they're all external to the soul, and that also like matches the subject of the dialogue, and then so they're all wealth, right? That might be a way to
Hmm.
explain it. Um and these Attic commentators, which are unnamed, their idea is that all belligerents use money as an instrument, but that doesn't weigh. Oh, so it's a philological point that is it? No, because, well, the thing is like the preposition dia can mean through, but I don't think that in this case it can mean through, because it's, where are we? 66, C7, 8. Because of the case. Um, yeah, so it'd have to be in, it would have to be in the genitive if it was to be. Um, or, okay, no, it could be by aid of. That's true. Um, yeah, I think it would be a bit odd, but you could see it as indicating the instrument, and then that would be, that's what the Attic commentators are suggesting. Oh, maybe we take this dia in an unusual way, and we think that it's an instrument, that it means instrument.
Hmm.
Um, and but Damascus has a more interesting answer in the next paragraph.
Okay. So, or is it preferable to understand by war necessary war? Hence, Socrates continues, we are compelled, such as the first war which he postulates in the Republic. According as the city increases, you need more land to feed its inhabitants, so that they have to wage war against their neighbors. This means that all wars that are necessary and in a way just have wealth as their cause.
The in a way just is interesting, and we'll get to that in a moment. So Damascus is making the point that in the text he says, um, for all wars are due to the desire to acquire wealth, and it is the body and the care of it to which we are enslaved, which compel us to acquire wealth. right? So he's saying it's what it because it's the compelling, it says that it must be necessary. And then he goes back to the Republic to see what its account of war is. And this goes back to why you need guardians, right? So the city of pigs has no reason to make war, right? The city of pigs, it just takes care of bodily needs and survival. And there's no need for any war there and for any warrior class, right? The first thing that means that you need to have that you need a military is that you want excess goods. You want more than just to survive. You want to live a good like prosperous life, right? That's what leads people to war. That's the thing that makes war necessary. Um, and that's that's a curious case. I mean, it's not clear why the slave could just become bigger, and it wouldn't need necessarily to go out for war. It does seem to imply something like that the um wanting wanting the luxury goods, like what makes them kind of special, and is the fact that other people don't have them, that you are superior to other people, right? Because it's entirely a status thing, right? It's
Mhm.
not about just satisfying your needs. It's about having things that are somehow you think that they reflect your worth, right? And therefore, it's connected to war. So it's not so much that war is for wealth in the sense of what obliges war, so confrontation with other people, is not wealth in the sense of getting material goods, but it's war in the sense of what establishes status, winners and losers, right? And so so he that's a that's an interesting piece in its own right, and that then would explain the idea that all wars are for the sake of wealth. That means that all wars are for the sake of like um, luxury or status, and then that makes sense in the light of the Republic. Right? So that's what because you can think about the argument in Plato, but seeing the laws and the Phaedrus about why you need a self-moving thing. So why do you need soul? Because you could imagine that everything was at peace, and the first thing that would everything was still was standing still. The first thing that would cause change, and so the thing that explains that change is necessary, is the self-moving agent. So here also, you imagine that everything is at peace. And so what can actually make war, even when everything is at peace? It's the desire for status. And so that is the cause of all war. The same way that the soul is the cause of all change. Of course, some bodies change other bodies. However, what means that there has to be change is the soul. So also, although there are wars that aren't fought over status, over wealth in the sense of being rich, there are like border disputes and there are family disputes and these kinds of things, religious disputes. But what the thing that would cause war, even if there was no war, and therefore is the cause of all wars, is the search for status, right?
Mhm. Right.
Um, so, and that explains also again how this is, as it were, the last garment to come off and the first to be put on. Because of course, this kind of jockeying for status is, of course, well known in like monastic communities, right? And so it's like something that even if you're living an ascetic life and you've purified yourself in the sense of like not having to take care of all the um, bodily desires directly connected to the body, you can still have a lot of this, jockeying for power and things like that.
Hmm.
And again, that kind of wanting to control things is like a reason for the soul to come down and be involved in the world of generation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now can you to 111?
Yeah. Okay. 111. The last garment and the most difficult to cast off is, on the appetitive level, ambition, and on the cognitive level, imagination. Hence, even the majority of philosophers are hampered by these, and especially by imagination. Therefore, Plato here bids the philosopher to strip himself even of this last garment. The first he took away from him when he took away loves and desires, using the commonest appetites as examples. Hmm.
Right. Um, eh, yeah, so this is just emphasizes the things that we've been talking about, but also the imagination is of course, is the sticking point between um, Plato and Aristotle, right? If it's possible to have thought without imagination. So he's going to now, in the paragraphs 112 and 113, talk about this, about how is it possible to know things without imagination, separate yourself from it.
Mhm. So, okay, but the point is that there is ambition, which is also a garment of the not ambition, imagination, and has to all.
Yeah, so he associates both of these. I mean, so Proclus and Damascus associate both these with the pneumatic body because they both last between lives. They're not directly connected. So imagination can be active even if we no longer have sense organs. So we can still imagine things. Sleep shows
Mhm.
that. Dreams show that. And ambition, of course, is a desire for something that's not immediately connected to our bodies. So they both can be longer lived than just um, than just our corporeal body, and in that sense, they're also the last to put on and the most difficult. And
Mhm.
they're
Okay. Um, Now, 112. The existence of non-imaginative knowledge is proved by the knowledge of indivisible things, such as the unit, the point, the now, as well as by the knowledge of universals. Any definite shape is already individual and already this. This proved so it is proved also by those realities which we cannot visualize, such as justice and temperance. It appeals also from the fact that transcendent forms can be shown to be indivisible and incorporeal, and from the proofs of the existence of incorporeal things generally. This is the way to handle this passage, not to reduce it to sense perception and imagination, on the ground that these can operate by indivisible apprehension, for these are precisely the kinds of knowledge it would have us avoid.
um right. So Proclus uh Proclus does say elsewhere that you can have that imagination can be a kind of noesis. Because it's as it were a passive nous. It's if what's proper to noesis is that you put forth something from yourself and you don't receive it from outside, then imagination can do this. Um, and here in the let me find this here. One moment. Um, there's yeah, so I'm sorry. I'm looking for something here. Yeah, he talked here about the need to search for pure knowledge, and also, and so that might be what's causing this discussion about the non-imagination, right? The knowledge that is not imagined. And it could be that Proclus in this case said, oh, well, imagination could be this, but he wants to emphasize that no, it can't possibly be the imagination because we're supposed to be moving away from this. Um, okay. Um, And he gives a number of examples of things that are. So the word here for non-imaginative is amorphotos. So what doesn't have a shape? That's why he starts with things like the unit, the point, and the now, because none of them have shape. And then the universals are like they don't have a specific shape because they have many possible shapes. The and justice and temperance as well, he says that they don't have a shape of their own because since they belong to the soul. Um, and then he mentions proofs about the forms as well. So that is his account of like how it's possible to have knowledge that's separate from imagination.
Hmm.
I feel like there's still something here that I'm not quite getting about like exactly what's provoked him to do this, to go into this digression. But I'll have to circle back to that.
Hmm.
Anyway, 113 is the same, it continues the same subject.
Okay. Now, and this is all like contrary to the idea that we could somehow have all of these kind of knowledge by abstraction from imagination or something.
Yeah, so for instance, like there's like Richard Sorabji in his book on time, he talks about the instant, right? The idea of an indivisible instant is like a limit of change. And and so you could think about like the unit, the point, and the now um as limits and abstractions. Of course, the Platonic arguments about how, well, the more perfect thing, the more perfect thing can't come from the more imperfect. So you can't explain these things through abstraction because then they would be results of more imperfect things. So they'd be even more imperfect and they couldn't have the precision that's lacking in those things. Um, and but even if you accept like because abstraction is as it were like a genealogical theory, where does this come from? Whereas independent of where it comes from, the point is that there is knowledge of these things, right? The
Hmm.
question is like, well, don't you always have to be imagining something? First, like, if you want to think about the first unmoved mover, don't you need to think at the same time of the heavens spinning constantly, right? Because that's like the proof. Um, well, so here he doesn't really answer that directly in 112. 113 will say something about that, but in 112 he doesn't really say. He just says, well, look at look at our arguments about forms, and then they'll explain to you.
Hmm. Okay. Um, how, yeah, one 13. How is it that we cannot think without imagination? Because imagination accompanies thought not as a constituent, but rather as a disturbing element, as a gale during a voyage. Hmm. 4. There are three kinds of necessary accompaniments. Number one, those that cause harm, as for instance, imagination. Number two, those that contribute nothing, such as matter.
Something.
Sorry, that's to contribute something, such as matter. Number three, those that neither harm nor contribute, for example, a shadow.
Right.
This is.
So this is like the the Aristotelian thing. Oh, like you cannot think of something without an image of it. And it's like, yeah, but the image actually gets in the way. So for instance, it's not that like you can't have a so the Aristotelian would say something like, if you don't think of the constant motion of the universe and so like the succession of day and night, then you won't be able to think of the first unmoved mover. The to because like that's what lets you, as it were, focus your thought to think that thing, right, as the cause of that motion. Whereas the Platonism says, no, you can think that thing fine without the specification of it as the cause of that knowledge of that mo change that you're imagining. So, for instance, um, you can think of it as the number that proceeds according, or the motion that proceeds according to number, which is an image of eternity remaining in itself, right? Remaining in one. And it's true that you will still have an imagination with you, but that will just, harm you. Will, for instance, suggest to you that this is that it only exists in the heavens, or that time is the heavens, and all these erroneous ideas that people get about what time or the first unmoved mover is, and and so it only harms. It doesn't like help you focus the thought or something. Um, and then the contrasts are right matter, which contributes something. So um, there you can like think about matter in general. It can be the instrumental cause. So like you cannot Socrates cannot walk without his muscles and his bones. Um, and so they do contribute something to his decision to stay or leave. But and then the shadow neither harms nor contributes. That might also be in the sense that the existence of perceptible things, which are like shadows of the forms, do not affect the forms at all, either one way or another. Okay. So that might be the idea of the shadow.
So the interesting thing with the first thing is something like that. It's true that knowledge or thinking always comes along with imagination, but we could still somehow distinguish the imagination from the thought itself.
Yeah, and once we've distinguished the imagination from the thought itself, we understand that the thought thinks, right? The thought knows what it knows despite the imagination, not because of the imagination.
Hmm.
So in a sense, it's like returning it to Aristotle, because like Aristotle says, oh well, it seems like we always have a picture in our head when we're thinking. And it's like, yeah, but you have to show that we are only thinking because of that picture, right? And not despite it. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's something like, oh, like you can only teach philosophy with examples and pictures and diagrams. And then True, but but is that like a crutch that we have to use, or is it really something that helps us think? Right? These are helps us learn. Right?
Right. And somehow, like, there would be a question if, like, so, like, how the, like, is it like true that we never or never think without an image, or, and therefore, like, somehow, whenever you think of like a form or something, you're like having an image in your head and then saying, no, 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 it's not that.
Right. A couple of things that I mean, first, we've been using image and picture here, but it's just important to remember that fantasia can mean any kind of representation. And this also gets to the heart of like debates about knowledge and representationalism. So we can understand the case, like, how is it that we can think without imagination? Be like, yeah, okay, we always have some kind of representation in our head, but
Okay, like a
knowledge is
word or a
actually
sentence.
right, like it could be a sentence or something, but or like a little mental model. But is it that we know because of the model? Rather, knowledge is some kind of union between our mind and the object of knowledge. And whereas the model is a different thing, right? It's literally something happening in our head. And the question is like, yeah, we always have a representation, but when we think about like what truth is and what knowledge is, which is some kind of, union or contact, the model doesn't really explain that. Right? And then he's saying that, the model is actually something that gets in the way, right?
Hmm.
So and this reminds me of like things like that like ideas like when you read about mystical experience, there are many
Hmm.
people who say like the point of the mystical experience isn't experience, right? Isn't what your isn't the how your consciousness is altered or the things that you see or hear in so-called mystical experience. Because the point of, the point is actually to do something mystical, something silent, right? And so it's going to be some kind of knowledge that since you now have this knowledge, it changes you and you have other knowledges because of it. You reach these new conclusions and you also change your life. But if you focus on the content, on the little representation that you have, your memory of the event, that will actually get in the way. This actually supposed to be some kind of contact with reality, whatever reality you're thinking about, which is goes beyond just something you can remember, right? This event that you can remember, right? It's going to be a knowledge about the things in your world, and then you'll think about the things in your world in a different way. And like that's the knowledge. The knowledge is not whatever thing happened to you. Right? And that like the imagination is a hindrance can be understood in that way. Of putting like, yes, you're always thinking, so something is always happening to you. But the point isn't what happens to you. The point is how the object enters into your life, right? Enters into your thought, into your knowledge, right? And in that sense, and that's what the knowledge really is. Um,
Right.
so
So I see. Like I've seen people like worrying or talking about like how if they try to think of God or something, and then they're told like God isn't a body, so you can't think it because they're always whenever you think of something, you have an image, and God isn't a word either. So changing it with a word doesn't solve anything. So and then we get into this like things. Okay, so when you're going to think, well, there's this sentence that represents it, or this image even doesn't matter. And then at the same time think, but it's not the image. And then you would need like be able, and then other people are like, don't say like that doesn't make sense because I guess they would identify the thought with the representation or the image or the knowledge. And then
Right.
if you don't identify it, then you turn it like you start saying myth, then you start saying like, well, knowledge isn't the thought or the representation, it's some ineffable thing, which sounds like it's not knowledge anymore. And then we also get into like the question like a point, even not even any abstract thing, like if we could like we get into this question like could we distinguish between things that we understand and don't understand, because we can definitely do operations on things that we don't understand, like all kind of mathematical games that people at least don't really understand. And there must be a difference in understanding like what a limit is and just being able to like do the operations like a calculator could do. And then if we separate the knowledge from these like mathematical operations or logic or anything, then it becomes very hard to see how to distinguish knowledge from not knowledge, from just like what's the criteria.
Mm, right. It seems that the knowledge, because of course, like distinguishing doesn't mean that we have to reject it. So, like, it seems to be part of, for instance, that Pythagoras' theorem that you can sit down and prove it. Right. That's so you know it in some sense because of that. It's you can show where it's from. And it's not like an opinion that there are times when, oh, I am not really sure why I believe that. So um and so it seems like that the logical manipulations that you can do, they seem to be at least, or so the mental activities, they seem to be a consequence of the knowledge. So if you have the knowledge, you have it. But the question is like, if all you have are those things, you don't have the knowledge yet. Because I guess like you can't give an account of why you're doing those things. Right? You can't give an account of like why does limit work like that. Like um and but to go back to the question of the like, oh, I'm told to, uh you know talk about God or thinking about God or like pray to God. And yet at the same time that God is not a body, God is not a word. So how does how does that happen? So well, the I guess the for instance, like the existence of God is a ground for saying that everything happens for a reason, right? And so if you know that God exists, then you will act as if everything happens for a reason. That's one thing. Or you also don't think that your prayers are just words, right? They are a prayer. There is some sense directed towards God in some sense. Not necessarily that God has ears or something, but there's a to whom, right? That you're praying. And um those are things that are independent. Those are like facts that are about the knowledge that are independent of whatever like whatever is in your head when you say the word God or when you think the word or when you read the word God or something. Like, do you act as if providence is real? Um when you are praying, are you executing an act of just reading words off a page, or are you executing an act of like talking to someone else, right? They're different kinds of actions, right? So, so these are things about how we describe reality and how we describe ourselves that can obtain or not, and that they're independent of as it were, our consciousness, what goes on in our consciousness when we're dealing with the word God.
Right. But then again, the question would be like the whole claim of the philosopher or the mystic for that case is that they have something besides for just performing the actions and saying the words and acting in a way that conforms with the hypothesis that God exists, for example, right? Because they're like saying, well, the normal religious people all act as if God exists, but they don't know. And I, for the philosopher, would say something like, I have proofs. And then you would say, well, does God consist of a proof? No. So you don't actually have something more than those people, except for this like ineffable thing that we can't really, like, maybe just we can't prove.
Okay.
And it's okay, I can't prove it to you, but it's still true. But like,
Right. Okay. I guess part of the claim is that you you can't really act as if consistently. Like there are limits to how much you can do as if. You need to knowledge is required for virtue to become a habit, right? And to become sedimented. I think that's part of the psychological theory here. Um, and uh, yeah, and I'm not sure that like the right. So you're asking like, what does the philosopher have be if the philosopher doesn't have a representation, right? If he says like there's no representation of God or like knowledge is not a representation, what does he have that the person who just follows rules has? Well, I guess it's like what does um so I don't know, let's think about a movie that's about someone alive, right? Like, oh, apparently there's like a new movie just out. Well, no, I think it's a documentary. So it doesn't work. So, but let's say there was like a movie about your life, right? And so there's also an actor who plays you. And so that person is just acting, right? So when we say what are they doing when they pick up the cup, and they say, oh, they are just they're going to follow the script, right? And they're not actually drinking water, especially because sometimes they do many takes, and so they can't keep drinking. And but rather they're just doing as if, right? Whereas, and so we describe their actions differently from you, who we say like you're actually doing the thing, right? And so also like the person who just follows rules, they're just like reading words off a book. They're not praying, right? So that would be, I mean, it's a distinction in how those um it's a it's a description in the way like when you find out like when a friend lets you down at the one moment when it's not financially good for them and they say oh they were just in it for the money, right? So there's a distinction between what they were doing before, like there's a distinction between like oh visiting visiting you when you were sick out of friendship and for the money, right? And in the for the money, they were just doing the thing, they were just pretending to do the thing or something like that, pretending to care. And whereas if in the case of real friendship, you'd say, oh, they were caring, right? So I guess the that is what the we use the same words. We often use the same words to describe the lives of very religious people and philosophers. And some of these very religious people don't have, the philosophers say some of these religious people don't have knowledge. And so they're just following the rules. What does the philosopher say by that? It's not that the philosopher has some extra thing in his mind or some extra experience. It's that the words mean what they mean when they're applied to the philosopher. I guess that's the claim. Whether this is satisfactory, that's a different question, but like it's at least an answer. Like when you say that the question isn't representation, what does the philosopher actually have? It's like we use the words in their simple sense in the case of the philosopher. Um,
Right. I guess it
uh,
would just be hard to like if the philosopher says, well, I can show it to you because I can give you 17 proofs of God or whatever. That's not really the answer because you could like teach proofs of God to little children. They're not going to understand it, but they can say the words and maybe even do the operations.
yeah, I think that there's yeah, anyone can imitate any part of philosophy. And if if you're a philosopher for a Platonist, you're not a philosopher because of anything you can show to anyone else. Right.
Hmm.
You have to be in it for something that's, well, it's just I want to live like how the world is. And that ultimately isn't something that you can show to someone because anything you can show can be imitated. Um, okay. So that was an interesting discussion about like, so what does the philosopher actually have if it's not a specific imagination?
Mhm.
Um, we still have some time. Let's continue. 114.
So 114. So long as the soul is in sympathy with the body, it belongs to another. When it exercises the civic virtues to itself and another, however, it is better to speak of belonging to another in this case, as has been shown in the Republic. Not sure what that means. When following the purifying virtues, it belongs to itself, and in the contemplative life, it is itself.
Right. Here it's unclear what even the translator's not sure what the reference to um what the reference to another is. Um it's in what sense does it belong to another? It could be that it belongs to the city, right? It belongs to another. Um but the gradation that he's doing here is and that's probably like a remark by Damascus, like correcting flaws. Proclus. So Proclus had this neat little thing that so when you're under control of the of your emotions, so that you get really angry and then you act it out, and you don't act according to virtue in these situations, then you belong to another because you're just reacting to what's outside. When you have civic virtues, you are still responding to things outside, but this is always modulated by, your virtues. And so you belong to yourself and to another. When you have purifying virtues, then you are no longer reactive at all. You are just acting um, um, according to, your separate life. Now, the distinction here with the contemplative is perhaps so the person who lives purificatory belongs to itself, whereas the one that is theoretical is itself, presumably because the theoretical or contemplative is the positive side of the purificatory virtues. So, what you're actually doing, so dialectic and contemplating the forms, that is, you are fulfilling what you can as a separate soul. In that sense, you
Mhm.
are yourself. This can also be connected to a reading of the First Alcibiades. So, in the First Alcibiades, there's the argument that who you truly are is your soul. And it's specifically, it's the nous is, as it were, the part of the soul that is most reflective, right? And so nous would be the soul in the strictest sense. And that's why when you have a contemplative life, you are yourself. That might be it.
Mhm.
But anyway, this is just a nice little way of thinking about the different virtues and in what sense do you belong to something or to something else or to yourself. Right.
Okay. 115. The question is raised whether a life of detachment or contemplation in the world of Genesis is possible. If this is true, Okay, the commentator says that in its perfect form, it cannot be attained here, but only beyond Genesis. So when you're dead or something like that.
Yeah.
It is better, and Damascus thinks that it's better to recognize the existence of all three modes of life, both here and in the hereafter. So three modes meaning the political, purificatory, and contemplative. Um, though in the hereafter they have an excellence far higher than here.
Right. So, I mean, you can say potato, potato, right? Because Proclus also says that there's an imperfect form that can be attained here. The beyond Genesis is after death, but it's more than that, right? Because Genesis is the whole world of generation and destruction. So as long as you're transmigrating, you're in Genesis, right? So
Mhm.
the perfect form of contemplation is only in the heavens, only when you've purified yourself completely and you leave the world of transmigration. And for a time, of course, there's no complete exit for Christ. So that would be the claim there. And so that, real contemplation only happens in the stars. Whereas the for Damascus, he prefers to say that, you can do all three in those places.
Mhm.
And that would be also interesting. So I guess what's new in Damascus is that there's a more perfect political life up there, right? That's something that Proclus doesn't say. Proclus, in some sense, says, no, the perfect political life is here, right? Whereas Damascus says, no, there's perfect political life there. So, in some sense, there's a perfect political life for the souls that are like following Mars and the sun at this moment. They're probably, and you can understand that if like they are consciously participating in the perfect city, which is the universe. Um, But so that would be a debate about whether that would really be a political life because they are not participating in the organization of anything up there. They're just following their stars. It's but anyway, that would be like the novelty of Damascus of like, is there actually a better political life later?
Mm. Okay.
Okay.
116. How can truth belong to the invisible world only? In that case, everything here below is false. Yes. The answer is things of this world are also true, but yonder, over there, truth is pure. Here, as Plato says, we can only come as near as possible.
Right.
Right? That's because truth
Um,
means something like unmixed or pure.
no, yeah, so well, the word truth here is just true. It's not Genesius, when he's talking about the true philosophers. So here he's talking about this that um, um, he says something. Uh, Here it says, "For if it is impossible to attain any pure knowledge of the of with the body, then one of two things is true: either we can never attain knowledge, or we can do so after death. Then, and not before, the soul is itself apart from body. While we live, we shall be closest to knowledge if we refrain as much as possible from association with the body." Um, so yeah, it's this impossibility of there being knowledge. Also, he says that the body prevents us from seeing the truth. Um, so here he says that there is truth here, but that there it is. Oh, yonder truth is pure. I mean, you could also translate that as, there the truth becomes purified. So in the sense that, there we will understand things perfectly. Um, that's that could be um uh, the notion. Not
Mhm.
right, so it's a transformation of what we already know here as true. It becomes perfectly true there. Um yeah, so uh not much explanation here. Oh, 117?
Okay. So if the soul is separable, how do we explain that it is not active in sleep and in insanity? And how can the orbit of the identical be impeded? And how can diseases handicap the soul? Um, these are all the questions of like how the soul seems to be influenced by the state of the body.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
To all questions of this kind, a better answer is in any case that we have that we have to actualized that we have not actualized the separate life. Hmm.
Right. So it's that if we had actualized a separate life, then, for instance, we would continue to be conscious in our sleep. We would lucid dream always, and things like and we would continue to think while we're sick, well. So that would be like the I don't know, like a mystical answer, an ascetic answer. Sometimes you see people make these claims, like if you live an ascetic life, then you will start to also be conscious while you're sleeping and things like that. So that seems to be his answer here.
All right, but wouldn't the answer, like the general answer, be something like that because it's separate, it's not doesn't mean that it's active in the body without the body being prepared or something?
Yeah, that's even an answer that he gave previously. There was a paragraph about insanity, right? And about the paragraph 92, right?
Hmm.
Though the soul has a separate existence, it is said to reside in the head. This is borne out by the fact that disease of the brain cause insanity. And there the answer is, yeah, it's separate, but the body has to be in a fit state to receive it. And that's not the case here. So here he's adding something uh, additional about that it becomes that if we actualize the separate life, then it would also be that. It's actually like the two answers go together. They don't contradict each other.
Hmm. Okay. Where am I? If the soul, yeah, we did this. 118. The proof must proceed by division. Either it is impossible to know the truth, a supposition proved false by our natural desire for it. Not sure how that's proved. Or it is possible here below, which has been shown not to be the case. Or thirdly, it can be known only in the hereafter. So that this argument is at the same time a proof of immortality.
Right. This seems to be part of the idea of, finding the themes of the text everywhere. And so here we also find a proof of immortality. Like before, he also found a proof of immortality in the commandment not to kill yourself. Uh, Said, oh, there it's the soul is already worrying about what will happen to it afterwards, so that shows that it's separate. Then he's doing something similar here. Why would you asked why does our natural desire for the truth show that it can't be impossible to know the truth? Presumably because nature does not do anything in vain, right? So we can have art, there can be artificial things that are pointless, but not natural things,
Yeah.
right? And so if there's a natural desire for something, then that object has to exist. That's probably the argument here. Okay. Now there's like this long section on the purification is the way to God, which is just really, it's mostly just about this idea about only the pure can touch the pure. Um, why don't we leave that, since it's a new subject, why don't
Yeah.
we leave that for next week?
Makes sense. Yeah,
And
I guess the question, even if that's a good proof, like you have to also assume that only this like very strict meaning of truth counts. Because people would say, well, there's a natural desire for truth, for as much truth as imagination gives or whatever.
Yeah. So, yeah, presumably that's part of this is something like, well, but Socrates can come and like if you only have opinions drawn from perception, Socrates can come and bring you and cause you to be very confused about what you actually know. And then you'll say, oh, uh, um, actually, perception doesn't satisfy my needs,
Hmm.
right? And so, since the needs aren't satisfied here, they can only be satisfied the next. That's
Hmm. Yeah, I guess. Okay.
um, okay. Well, so we'll talk next week. Right. So that's the 8th.
Hmm. Okay. I'll take care of the
Okay.
payment like on Wednesday. I just got
Okay. That's
the
fine.
bill. The bill.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.